Welcome in to the Res, everybody. The stream that was supposed to happen yesterday, we moved to today. So hopefully we can get to you guys' questions and you guys enjoy the interview that we have today. We have a very special guest from the company DNV. This person brings more than 12 years of experience managing, designing, convening, mediating, evaluating, and facilitating equitable and inclusive processes for politically and data-driven complex environmental, social, and racial conflict, and large-scale collaborative programs, infrastructure projects, and policies. Her work has been in the service of government agencies, local, state, and federal, by BIPOC communities, environmental justice, disadvantaged and vulnerable, underserved, and rural areas, with an emphasis on bridging the data, technical, and human dimensions through a diverse equity, inclusion, access, and justice, and community benefits lens. Her expertise is across sectors of clean energy, energy efficiency, sustainability, transmission planning, EV, transportation, climate change, water and air quality, natural resources, housing, houselessness, public health, and safety. Given her deep experience, her work is foremost informed by her experience and community perspective, having lived environmental, climate, and energy burdens firsthand. She has created a framework that encapsulates and provides a clear guide for implementation of her work as described above. Please, everybody, welcome to the Res from DNV, CC Vu. Let me get you on real quick. And here we go. CC Vu, welcome to the Res.
Thank you, Mitchell, for that wonderful introduction. And thank you so much for having me on today. It's such an honor. And thank you for taking time out of your weekend to talk to me.
Most definitely. I mean, everybody's busy. And this is being recorded. It's being live streamed on Facebook and YouTube as well. But like I said, it's being recorded. So anything that people want to go back on, we can always rewind and replay it.
Okay, sounds good.
So my first question for you is, besides the introduction I gave, can you give the people a little bit more background on what you do and why you do it?
Yes, of course. Thanks, Mitchell. That was a really comprehensive introduction already. So I'm going to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about what DNV, our company does. A little background on DNV, and DNV stands for Der Norske Veritas, and it is all about trust, building trust with communities, customers, and so forth. And we are an independent expert in quality assurance and risk management. Our core purpose since our founding in 1864 is to safeguard life, property, and environment. And we extend this principle to various industries, as you had introduced me: energy, healthcare, maritime, and anywhere DNV provides assurance, technical expertise. We even work in the digital solutions world to promote safety, sustainability, and trust. You know, as you mentioned in my introduction, I've been doing this work for 12 years, over 12 years. And I chose this work because in trying to, you know, pinpoint the area where I can make the most impact in our world, I looked at projects that are large scale. And my goal is to work on those projects because in those projects are where the large scale impacts happen to community. Not only the large scale impacts, but I look at the flip side, which is that's where all the large scale community benefits can happen. So I very diligently and intentionally chose this route because I want to be able to make the most impact. Also, I chose consulting as a mechanism because it allows me to work with different communities, multi-stakeholders, tribes, different projects, different areas of focus. So that's a little bit more on me. I'm also a mom of a 12-year-old daughter, and I live in San Francisco, California. Yeah, and that's a little bit more on my background and DNV's.
A 12-year-old daughter. That's a
Yeah.
good age right there.
Middle school.
I think most of our viewers can attest to that.
Yeah, yeah.
So what does DNV bring to the table for the Native community as for like most of our viewers that will be watching this?
Yeah, so as independent consultants, I mentioned just now that we have the opportunity to work for to advance various community needs, balancing that with the technical complexities of projects on the developer and the governmental side. So one of our priorities is to work to ensure Native communities have a fixed seat at the decision-making table when it comes to energy and climate-focused research, initiatives, and projects that we are involved in. We work to amplify the Native Indigenous voice, advocating for impacts to be mitigated in a way that consider and respects Native culture, needs, and interests. More than that, we work to ensure benefits for Native American communities and make sure that they are built into project outcomes, milestones, and where it has impacts. We also strive to communicate project needs, budget constraints on the project development side and owner side, so that Native communities can understand and negotiate with project owners.
That right there
Yeah,
is a big one with having the Native communities, understand what you guys do, because a lot of communities are not communities. A lot of companies, when they come onto tribal lands, they just give out pamphlets. You know what I mean? They just say,
yeah,
"Here's the information. Read
yeah,
it." 9 times out of the 10, the average Native American isn't going to understand that.
exactly.
So, so you guys are more willing and more open to, bring the tribal communities in and then help them understand everything.
Yeah. We try to bridge those technical complexities with the human dimensions and needs, and especially with Native communities. There are many pieces of culture and how sacred lands are viewed, and we're also educating the developer and the government side of things too. So what we see our role as is to bridge that gap and to mediate that so that both sides come to an understanding, and then there are mutual benefits that come out of a project that otherwise would either trample over communities or get canceled. Yeah, so that's a main goal of what we try to do in our work.
If I may ask, what type of like how are you helping the government and the companies understand the not the benefits, but the ancestral lands and what not to touch, what not to dig on, what not
Mhm.
to, mess with when they're on tribal lands? How are you guys giving that information to the companies?
Yeah, so that information should come firsthand from Native communities. We see ourselves as facilitators. We see ourselves as creating that safe space for Native communities and leaders to come to the table and then be able to, in a self-determined manner, communicate that to government entities, developers, and so forth. So we ensure that the voices are around the table so that you can communicate directly where there is need to clarify or to facilitate. That's what we see our goal as, to ensure that there's no miscommunication, no misinterpretation. Make sure that if there is any misunderstanding during a conversation at the table, that we call for a reset. So we have a number of strategies that we use, that I have used in my past, and I bring my community lived experience to it. One of which is restorative practices. So, bringing government to the table with a Native leader or community, they bring a history of harm and of being taken advantage of. So we make sure that we set up the forum so that there's that understanding. So there's a lot of prep that goes into bringing people to the table. The other strategy that we use is it's called interest-based problem solving. So sometimes we oppose something because, right? That's what we communicate, because we don't trust the other side. So
Yeah.
we say, it's because I don't like your plan, right? That's a position.
Yep.
But really what's underlying that is that you're not respecting us and our voices, and therefore we don't want to work with you. So if we can, get to a level of trust so that the Native community or leader can speak that around the table, then the government entities or the developers can hear it firsthand, and they can hear it without filters.
That's a big one right there, because
Yeah.
I've sat in with tribal leaders, and when they feel like their voice isn't being listened
Yeah.
to, or if they're being stepped over, then they don't want to do business with anybody after that.
Yeah.
And
I
that's a
mean,
big one.
that's very fair. And you can't expect to come to the table, disrespect someone, and then for them to want to work with you, right?
And
Yeah.
it works vice versa too, because I've sat there and I've had to tell, some tribal leaders, like, take a step back. I mean, you're coming off a little bit too, too, I'm just gonna say, mean,
Yeah.
and work with them, work with them. So
Yeah.
it goes both ways, because tribal leaders do it and business owners do it as well. So
Yes. And many times it's justified, because again, Native leaders come to the table having been taken advantage of and lost
yep.
trust, so of
Hmm.
course you're human, you come to the table, you have all these feelings, both sides. So I see my role is to ensure that we speak to each other respectfully. We put aside some differences to focus on the goal at hand. If we need to address some of those past harms, we use restorative practices to have those conversations. So yeah, it's very important to have that understanding and then leave the table feeling like that was constructive and not upset or wanting to leave. the
Yep.
conversation. Yeah.
When you guys come to building, when it comes with energy, how will you guys be helping out Native communities with energy?
Yeah. So I think I mentioned earlier, one of the biggest ways that I want to impact, make positive impact for communities is that those community benefits. So for instance, I'll give you an example of a project. A transmission line that's going to be routed through sacred lands to this community. What we do is we make sure that at the early stages, the engagement happens.
Mhm.
Even during the study phase, where we're looking at the developers looking at different routes, we bring tribal voices in, and we do our assessment based on data. We look at geospatial screening tools, maps, and everything, and then we look at the data that represents the community challenges in that area. Then we
So,
bring
so,
those challenges to the table. Yeah.
so
So
before you go any further,
yeah.
I like that explanation. I like how you said that. Now we
Mhm.
do have what we call down here tribal monitors.
Yeah.
Would you guys be working alongside them? Because there has been companies that have come down to, our areas,
Yeah.
and their companies start digging and start doing stuff, and they don't notify the tribal monitors.
Right.
There's pottery, there's stuff that they find.
Yeah.
And we've heard in the past of, horror stories where they just either destroy it, get rid of it
Mhm.
completely so they can
Mhm.
continue building through that area that they're at. Would you
Right.
guys work alongside with the tribal monitors and, if they find something, completely stop what they're doing?
Well, so absolutely, we will engage tribal monitors, and we have in the past, and communicate the impacts along the way. Right. For instance, from the study, from the beginning, when the routes are being studied, to siting, to planning, to permitting, and then construction. So we ensure that tribal and other community voices are integrated into the project milestones, so that when some action or decision needs to be made on anything, even a design of a concept, we want to get tribal community feedback into it. So if there's an issue, even remotely, a remote issue that we don't know about or the developer doesn't know about, we want to uncover that. And if I may tell you a quick story, and people are like, well, what do you mean by that? So I was working on a project that ran through communities. It was a rail line, and
Yeah.
in this one community, the noise impacts will be so acute that it can affect hearing. It
Yeah.
can cause hearing loss. So our environmental team came up with a design for a sound wall to mitigate that acute noise impact, and then located in a certain part of this community.
Hmm.
And we came to the community because we were so happy. We were like, okay, we can mitigate this noise for you at over 90%. And the
Oh,
community
wow.
said no. The community just outright said no. And we showed them where it was going to be and everything. And we were like, what?
Why?
So we were curious, and so we had a series of conversations, maybe over 4 to 6 months, conversations with different neighborhood associations, different community groups, local government, you name it. We were there trying to, and then as we were going, the community felt that they had enough trust because we stuck with them, trying to understand what it is that they confided in us. And they
Mhm.
said, well, if all well and good, you can mitigate by that sound wall, but if you locate it there, it will exacerbate gang violence for our community. So that the environmental team, these technical engineers were there, and they were like mind blown, right? Who
Yeah.
would have ever thought a sound wall would exacerbate gang violence, right? So for that particular project, we went back to the drawing board. We came up with a design that only mitigated for 60-something% of the noise. But we had conversations with the community on what benefits can offset the remainder of the impacts. And they named it self-determined conversation. They're like, maybe we can have a youth center so that we can encourage our youth to, go out there after school rather than going into gang activity. How
Yep.
about better lighting in our communities so we can discourage some of those gang activity? How about soundproofing the schools and some of the buildings that are in that proximity? And so that was a community benefits package that we were able to negotiate on top of the mitigation measure. And these are the kinds of packages that we can negotiate with developers in any type of energy project, whether it be a microgrid, whether it be offshore wind, transmission, energy efficiency programs. That's just an example. Secondary impacts are sometimes just completely above people's understanding.
Yeah.
So that's a story I tell over and over again because it's so it really gets to the point.
They got so many benefits out of it. Now,
Yeah.
with these live streams, I tend to ask the bad parts too.
Of course.
Is the bad part for this would be they receive so much benefits, but what did they have to give up? Because we have in tribal communities, we have the good people that see the benefits, but then we have the bad people that see, not bad people, but they see a half empty, half full glass. Yes, we're
Mhm.
getting community center. Yes, we're getting this, but what are we giving up? How much land are we giving up? How much water are we giving up? Um, if you guys were asked those types of questions, would you guys be defensive and not tell? Or would you guys be more, open about what you guys are going to do with the land that you receive or water that you receive or anything like that?
Yeah. Well, if I am leading a project or involved in a project, the goal and priority is to make sure that the project does not cause more impacts or burdens and unintended consequences for our communities. So we will have conversations to understand Native community needs. And if for some reason giving up this land here doesn't work, let's talk about rerouting the project. And if we reroute the project, but we can't reroute it this far, as much as you need, let's talk about putting in a park or a greenway or something so that we respect the sacred lands. So we have these conversations where it's feasible. We can go back to the drawing board, like I illustrated.
Yeah.
Where it isn't feasible, we try to talk through solutions that both sides can live with, right? And you don't leave the table feeling as if you lost something
Yeah.
huge. So that's the goal, and that in reality, there's just a lot of back and forth, and I think in the last few years or so, because of community opposition to projects and developers have just seen cancellations and delays, they are more open than ever to sitting down, having these conversations, talking it through rather than bulldozing through, and then having to cancel and then incur more costs in the long run. The investment that they put in to talk to tribes, to talk to communities, pays off, tenfold in the long run. So
Yep.
a lot of developers and project owners are sort of wising up to that. They even are bringing in their own engagement team, their own tribal liaisons, so yeah, they're, and I can only speak to projects that I am involved in or I am leading, and that is the outlook of a project that we work on. And then even like in research, we ensure that there is an acceptable IRB data sharing process to recognize that data sovereignty, energy sovereignty, and all of those, we have it all out on the table, and discuss that. And if there is something that comes up, it comes up, and then we have a conversation about it.
How many different types of tribal communities are you guys working with as of date?
Oh, we probably have worked with, most of my work has been in California. So we've worked with a number of tribes through California. I say like a dozen tribes, most of whom are federally recognized. We are really trying to work with the tribes who don't have that recognition too, but the data is very lacking.
Yeah.
Our team also covers, so we cover entire North America. So we work with First Nations in Canada, and then some of the tribes we've worked with in sort of the Midwest region. But I would say maybe about, 20 tribes or so far. It's been really a challenge to make headway, especially as a consulting, big consulting company. You're seen with a lot of, suspect. You're suspect because what do you want? So it takes time. For instance, I've worked with, one of Seven Skyline, David Harper, and I've been working with him for over 2 years. And we go back and forth. It takes time to build trust.
Oh yeah, most definitely. Especially with David.
We don't want to rush it. Yeah, I don't want to rush it. I want to honor the pace. And there's a report that we came out with that Dave was a part of called The Pace of Trust. So we recognize that.
Yeah, if it wasn't for David, this wouldn't be happening. He's a very smart, intelligent man.
Oh my gosh. I think he's listening too.
He might be. So when it comes to diverting things,
Yeah.
the one thing I know out in California were the fans. I call them fans because that's what they look like, big fans.
You mean the wind turbines?
Yeah, the wind turbines. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just call them fans. I mean, that's what everybody calls them here.
Okay.
When everything was put into place, they didn't think about, wildlife.
Yeah.
Because what had happened and what we heard was the desert tortoises and, the desert turtles that travel those areas, they cut off their natural boundaries and their natural
Habitat,
trails.
yeah.
Would you guys, when you guys do your research and your studies and your findings, would you
Yes.
take that into consideration as well?
Yes, we have an entire team that focuses in on wildlife. In fact, at the recent conference that Seven Skyline and I were at, one of my colleagues was up there talking about birds, just a whole panel on impacts to birds. There are experts that also work with bats, and like for one of my projects, there was the coyotes. Through California, there's So we definitely have a team that works on wildlife, as well as environmental, as well as water, natural resources. So yeah, we definitely look at the entire chain of impacts.
Now, can you explain to us climate equity? How does that tie into what you guys do at DNV?
Yeah. So equity for us is about really recognizing that our country has a deficit in trust, deficit in harm to our communities. Our highways were built, over communities, next to communities, our rail lines. So when we come into this work, we ensure that those voices that have historically been left out are uplifted and amplified. And the benefits that go to those communities are a priority. So we do consider wildlife. We do consider, other communities, landowners, and so forth, but we put the most emphasis on uplifting those voices that have historically been left out, underserved, harmed, and that's that. So if you have you seen the visuals where you have the three people who are there's one short person, and then if you put the same stool, the short person is still at a deficit. So what you do
Yep.
is you build that stool higher so that this person can be on equal playing ground with the others.
Yep.
So that is the work that we do. And within climate, our communities that are disadvantaged, have been disadvantaged, continue to be disadvantaged, continue to be marginalized. Communities have the most wildfire risk, flooding because of where they have to, all the redlining activity. So we need to consider all of that data as we work to ensure climate and energy equity. So for instance, with energy efficiency programs, we want to make sure that tribal communities who have been historically left out, for instance, a utility would come in and try to upgrade, a home in a tribal community, and then they install a heat pump, but they don't. And then when they leave, the household will leave the doors open and wouldn't use the technology or the measures correctly. That we ensure that those communities also get the awareness and the monitoring and then to ensure that they know how to use it, so that they get the most benefit out of that, rather than just dropping in, here you go, so we go deeper than just dropping things in for communities. We ensure wraparound services.
Yes.
Yeah.
What type of new technologies would you guys be bringing to tribal communities that they probably don't have already?
Well, I think, as I mentioned, like heat pumps, it's not new, but it is, they are not as effectively installed, because what you need to do is do engagement with those households, ensure that you're coming in and you ensure the understanding of what we are trying to achieve with those heat pumps. We're trying to save the household money in their energy bill. So that's the heat pumps. There are, microgrid technologies. EV technologies is another area that is very obscure right now, because is there a need there? Quite yet. Community, native communities, maybe they don't want to use electric vehicles yet. So we have to sort of bring in the technology as it is accepted by communities. Another technology that I have talked to a specific tribe about, historically offshore wind or onshore wind gets opposed because of wildlife impacts, marine impacts, community impacts. But this particular tribal community, it's also a tribal fishing community, they're trying to, on their own, fund these studies that would design a technology, a wind technology that would allow wildlife, marine life, and communities and wind turbines to coexist. So there's that type of technology as well. And there are many, like for transmission, we bring in HVDC substation designs and things like that. So it gets really technical. And then induction ovens are another technology that we really try to promote, because the indoor air quality that the natural gas stoves and heaters emit are very harmful. In fact, yesterday I just read a story about how the benzene concentrations from the indoor gas emissions harm children.
Oh,
You
wow.
know, doubly than they harm. They harm adults, but they are even more harmful for children. So we
And
ensure, yeah,
and
yeah,
why is that?
just children have, you know, more developing lungs, and the
Hmm.
concentration is emitted in indoor gas use. That's how powerful it is.
Okay.
You know, and as adults, we have more developed lungs, we have more
Yep.
immunity, you know, so those concentrations oftentimes are more tolerated. But for children, it's, you know, that with their lungs still developing, they're still developing their immunity. It impacts them much more. So induction, bringing in induction stoves in to replace gas stoves and electric water heaters, everything electric. But it also requires that, you know, the utility upgrade the housing stock, you know,
Oh, yeah.
to be up to standard, right? So then there's that piece of it. So there's incentives for communities to do that, but if they don't know about it, you know, they're not going to take advantage of it, and they're going to continue to, you know, have the burden, the energy burden and the pollution burden.
So is that
From
something that you guys as a company would bring to the tribal community as far as knowledge and possibly even help, I guess, fund something like that for some tribal communities? Because I know there are some tribal families here that still run off of gas where I live.
Yeah, I mean, I still am trying to, you know, switch away from my gas stove. It's not easy.
Oh, wow.
It's not inexpensive, you
Hmm.
know, and you have to upgrade your panels in your home and so forth. Yes, if we are contracted with utilities for some of
Hmm.
these programs, in fact, we're running working with a utility and running a pilot within public housing complexes where it's historically very challenging. It's owned by, you know, the state or the local municipality, and the owner, you know, there's a manager, and then the residents really don't have that level of knowledge. So we're
Yeah.
working with the utility to do some outreach within the public housing complexes to, you know, raise awareness of the benefits of these technologies. The other thing is, it's not a priority for some of our communities who have other
Yep.
burdens. They work 3 jobs. You know,
Oh, yeah.
they can't sleep, and they face other challenges that are more a priority for them than just bringing in, you know, like doing um, energy efficiency measures or so forth. So yeah, you know, doing this work, you have to understand, you know, those perspectives. And if it's not a priority for a community, you can't push it, right? You have to
Yeah.
honor where they are. You do it slowly and, you know, slow persistence, you know, because it is to their benefit in the end, but they dictate their timeline.
So what are some of the more crucial points, I guess, when you guys go to tribal communities? So, we talked about the gas. What are some that you guys have actually, stumbled upon that are more focused on?
On tribal communities.
Yes.
Yeah. So, one of the challenges is starting engagement early with tribal communities in sort of the research and study phase,
Hmm.
because um, let me just give you an example. Right now, I'm working on a statewide initiative to decarbonize by 2045. That's the goal of the state. And
That's
one of
pretty quick.
the initiatives within that mix to decarbonize is to decommission gas pipelines throughout the state. Hundreds of thousands of gas pipelines.
That's a
We're
lot.
just in the exploration phase. We're just studying. We're pulling together data to inform the state on potential community challenges, energy burdens, pollution, even like critical services, and hazardous materials, and you name it. We're trying to consider the data, but in engaging with tribal voices, the question comes up, what if your data shows leaks in this pipeline area that runs through native lands? How are we going to get that fixed? How are we going to mitigate that safety and hazardous issue? And so that's a challenge for us in our role as independent consultants, is that the only thing that we can do in this phase is be able to communicate that how dire the situation is based on the data that we've collected, and then also collect tribal community feedback on how dire it is, report it to the state. We cannot dictate, and then we can make recommendations in terms of mitigation, but we are not in the position to influence any action, because it is really at the research stage. Unless it's a project that we're doing environmental clearance on and permitting, we aren't able to discuss with tribal communities what that mitigation looks like. We can pass the word to the state. We can express how dire the situation is. It is safety, but beyond that, we don't have the power to instill community benefits or mitigation. That conversation is then up to the state. So that's a real challenge for us in our role. And as much as I wish that I could have more impact, that is sort of where our, sphere of influence stops, and so that's part of it. That's one challenge that I do want to bring up. The other challenge is really trying to, approach tribal communities pre-positioned to do work with them, understanding what their challenges are, make sure we have the IRB process in place so that we respect the data sovereignty, energy sovereignty issues, and then just really being able to balance the time that we need to build that trust with the budget that we have on the project side, budget and time constraints. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, you did. So for the communities, when it comes to the energy sector, I did talk to Seven Skyline about this question. I have asked Snyder about it. What type of energy efficiency technologies would you offer to, let's say, our tribe? We have sunshine, a lot of time of the year. We're next to the Colorado River, and our dam, unfortunately, isn't working at full capacity. So and I understand just recently there was a notification that was sent to some of our tribal members where they were paying extra fees to get more electricity, but now as of late and starting next month, they won't be paying those fees anymore. But if that was still going on, what type of energy technologies would you offer to these tribal members here?
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to say without having the direct conversation and really assessing what the community needs are based on the data that we have. So, but for many tribal communities who want to achieve energy sovereignty, and interconnecting to transmission or the grid is such a challenge. I think one of the biggest solutions is community solar with a microgrid, so that you can operate independently. But beyond that, I would need to really assess the needs, and the team would need to come in. The engineering team, the development team would need to come in and figure out. And then it also depends on your landscape, your land use requirements, right? So we can't just suggest a silver bullet for something, like a one-stop shop type of solution when the community landscape is more complex. And then what about what the needs are for the community? And how ready they are and what they prefer and what are the cultural issues
Yeah.
that we need to consider before we plop in some sort of, you know, technology or machine or something like that. So yeah, I'd have to really explore that further with data and conversations and understand what the needs and the limitations are of the area and the community.
Oh no, I fully get it. I mean, there's so many different options that we can look at. I just
Yeah.
like to talk about energy, maybe
Hmm.
solar,
Yeah.
and I don't know if you were at the symposium, if you got to see the gizmo.
I
That
missed that one. I missed that one.
you
I
missed
think
that
that
one. That
I think that one was in I forget where that one
it was
was.
here. We had that here.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember Dave telling me about it, but I just could not make that symposium. The one
When
that I was
they
able to attend was the Tucson one. Yeah.
when they talked about the gizmo, and our community here, the ones that went were so enthused by it. It myself too included. To
Yeah.
have just a little thing come in, be at your house, and be able to power your house is
Yeah.
that's amazing.
Yeah. And be
Is that
able to understand how to use it
Oh, yeah.
optimally, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because if you use it wrong, then you don't get the full benefits
Mhm.
of the technology as well. Yeah, I
Oh,
was so bummed that I could not go to. I need to go back and read up on it and figure it out.
well, I
How it
actually
works.
have that, if you go to I'll share the link to you so you can watch
Okay.
the whole presentation.
Oh, that would be great. Yeah.
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 So, moving on,
Yeah.
are you guys gonna be working alongside 7 Skyline for any type of future, collaborations on any type of reservations?
Yeah, I mean, we are trying as we speak. So I've been working with Dave, as I mentioned, for the last couple of years. We just started to build more relationships with other Seven Skyline leadership and staff. We had a couple of sit downs recently where we're trying to discuss our capabilities, where our strengths are, where we can partner. So,
Mhm.
without a doubt, we are exploring all different opportunities to work with Seven Skyline, but on Seven Skyline's terms and with due respect to their viewpoints and concerns. In fact, recently we had a grant opportunity that we propose a partnership with, but there were concerns. Seven Skyline raised a lot of different and very fair concerns
Mhm.
that didn't make us think about that first. So we thought about it and we were like, okay, let's talk about this, continue talking about it. Let's find a pathway to work together. We've been going back and forth. We've been getting ideas from the team on what we can do to ensure that even in like our proposal to the state on this project that we take into consideration Seven Skylines feedback. So yeah, we're exploring many different pathways, and whenever an opportunity comes up, I think of Seven Skyline and we have a conversation. So I'm hoping that will become more fruitful soon and we have a solid partnership.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah, I only hope the best for 7 Skyline and you guys as well. I mean,
of course. Yeah, it would
th
be a
this
real privilege to work
this
with
is a
Seven
major stepping stone for the Native community, and when I first started doing this, people didn't understand, and I had to tell them, like, "You guys don't understand, these companies that are coming in are only here to help us.
Yeah.
They don't have another agenda, they don't have anything on the side that they wanna get out of it. They're here for the tribal community, they're here for the average tribal person to
Mhm.
help them with their pockets and help them with their lives."
Yeah, I can speak to my role at DNV and our leadership. We are very committed and keen on working with tribes and our communities. I cannot speak for other companies though, but I
Yeah.
can say that many companies coming in now are more attuned to the needs and concerns of tribal communities, and I can only hope that they follow through, on their commitments.
Yep. Lastly,
Yes.
for the future, where do you guys see your assistance coming in with tribal communities? And the benefits for the youth.
For the youth?
Yes.
Yeah. Um, overarchingly, we want to be able to be involved in as many projects as we can possibly take on that has any impacts or involve native voices.
Mhm.
And where there are impacts that we see, we will be there to ensure that work with tribes and native communities are in scope. Okay, so we scope it, we budget, we make sure that we do it in an accountable manner. We don't just throw in a few hours and call it a day. So
Oh, yeah.
our role is to make sure that whatever work scope that we take on that has impact or affects tribal communities, we do it accountably, and we make sure that we budget enough for it so that at least we can respect culture, and we make sure that there's a process in place so that going forward, that's how we can benefit tribes. And then once we are in engagement and we talk about the complexities of the project, we ensure the feedback loop. So you all put out your time and effort to give us meaningful feedback, and then we don't throw it away. We
Mhm.
incorporate it, and then we come back and report back to you how we incorporated it. If we can't feasibly incorporate it, we make a recommendation of what to do next as a pathway there. We don't just say, oh, we can't do it, so too bad, So we ensure that feedback loop. I mean,
I mean, it's the
uh,
truth. I mean, that's happened before.
yeah, and I think sometimes it becomes so difficult that people don't know of any solutions. And I think
Yeah.
one of the ways that we can support tribes is to continue those conversations, make sure that you have a fixed seat at the table, as I mentioned at the beginning, not just sort of whenever it suits you. It's a fixed seat, it's always there. And the benefits, we want to make sure that they are done in a way that is self-determined and with respect, and commensurate with the harm. So we want to make sure that the tribes, some tribes may not understand what the value is to
Yep.
giving up this land, or giving up this time or whatever, and they may sell themselves short. I think Dave Harper is there to make sure that that doesn't happen, but we are also backing him up, and others that work for tribes up, to make sure that the benefits are commensurate, and not like, oh, can we ask for this amount when the project is this amount? So that's another way that we see our involvement. In terms of youth, um, it's an area that we see as very critical, because if we don't educate and involve youth, it doesn't um, it doesn't translate to sort of future work. Also, when we communicate with youth, youth can communicate to their elders.
Yep.
So youth are another way that we communicate with tribal leaders and elders and people who are more, introverted and aren't out there talking. So youth can be sort of bridge that gap. And
Oh, yeah.
that's where I see the role of youth. And I always, in fact, the roundtable that Dave was on for the transmission, I was hoping to get a youth voice on there, but I think it was just too challenging, and we weren't able to do it. But yeah,
The youth plays a very big part, and I can't stress that enough here, especially on our reservation, because they understand things that we don't. There's
that
times
too.
where there's a youth that comes to me and tells me, "Why don't you do it this way?" And I'm like, "I never thought about that."
Yeah,
So they have ways of talking to older people that we don't. So yeah, I
yeah,
mean that's I think that's a point that needs to be brought up more, and then companies need to start hitting on that more. I mean, we have influencers,
yeah.
YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and they can get stuff out a lot faster than we can.
Right. But it's also youth are a built-in trust you
Yes.
know, so for the community, because they're part of the community. And when they speak to the elders, they're part of the family. And that's, you know, that it actually is sort of it's a leg up, if you will,
Yep.
in engagement. So yeah.
All righty, Cece. I appreciate you coming on a Saturday at that. You know,
My pleasure.
it's been kind of hard to schedule this one, but we got
I
it
know.
scheduled. We got it done.
Yeah,
um,
you did.
I will talk to David to get you back on, hopefully, and we can talk more and discuss more because I know people they like to comment afterwards, and then they talk to
Okay.
me and they say, who was this person? Why did they talk about this?" So I'll be able to get those questions, and hopefully in another podcast we'll be able to, answer those questions for them.
I'm here and willing. And it's always a pleasure and it's a privilege to be here addressing, issues for our Native and tribal communities and speaking with you, Mitchell. Yeah, anytime.
And I appreciate you coming on. DNV, big company, just like Schneider, just like Seven Skyline. I
Yeah,
am a small podcast, but I
yeah,
appreciate you guys giving me the time, the opportunity to get you guys out and get you guys' voices out there for the tribal community and to express your gratitude towards the tribal community as well.
yeah. Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, it's mutual.
Thank you. And once again, everybody, CC Vu from DNV, thank you for stopping in, and we hope to see you again on the Res.
Yeah, thank you. And happy Mother's Day to all
Yes,
mothers out
happy
there.
Mother's Day to all. I forgot about that. Thank you. Thanks for
Okay.
stopping in, Susie.
All right. Of course.